Hi. I'd like to start today by trying to explain the idea of how energy works for people who are very ill. I'm not sure if it's a concept that's obvious to everyone, um, especially because people who are sick like me sometimes are capable of functioning well, and when you see them, they look like they're okay. And so, and that's a difficult thing for sick people to deal with a lot because then you're giving people the impression that you're well. And so, and you also don't necessarily talk about the fact that you're not well, or you don't want it to be obvious. And some people also don't share it with people. So, some people, for example, have a job and people at work don't know they're sick, for example. Um, I would hope that they tell their friends, but, anyways. Um, and it's easy to assume that because somebody can function at one moment, that means that they can function at other moments. But the way it works is that somebody like in my situation right now, I have a limited amount of energy units. So the way I see it a little bit is, like you have video games and you've got like the bar with like the energy. Well, some people have a bar that is long and some that have that one that is short. And so when you have something like Lyme disease, or in my case, I guess the way it's coming out through chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and many other symptoms, but those are the two that influence kind of a lot the energy level. Um, well, I would say that I start the day with about right now I would say about 100 energy units. At the worst, where I was during my treatment, maybe 3 months ago, I would say that I had about 10, um, 10 energy units. And at that point, something like taking a shower is maybe, 5 units of energy. Or, you know, um, making breakfast would be like 20 units of energy. So it's too much. These numbers I'm coming up with are a little bit random. Obviously, it's hard to come up with precise data. But I would say that I would consider somebody normal to have about 10,000 units of energy. And so something like a shower, making breakfast, getting to work, taking the bus, driving, talking to people, an important thing. It's things you don't even notice. You On that 10,000, you can have a really, really stressful, intense day. And at the end, be tired, but go to sleep and feel rested. And so there's so much more to play with. And so for me right now, I have 100, let's say. So 100, I mean, I could do a lot with that. And so, I've tried to start making plans. Unfortunately, I've had to cancel most of them in the last 2 or 3 weeks because I wasn't feeling well enough the day of. Um, but still, it's like a possibility. And over the last month and a half, I went camping for a weekend, and I went to a wedding, and both those things I couldn't have done it with 10 units of energy. So obviously, whenever I go somewhere, I spend the least energy possible, and so things like getting dressed, like for the wedding, for example, or um, just staying up are essentially what I use my energy on. So it's not like when I get out of the house for the weekend, I'm like running around doing any of those things. So I still need to conserve my energy very, very much. There's also a possibility, even when very sick, because the mind is a wonderfully powerful thing and the body is as well, to borrow energy from the next day. And that's a concept that's even more difficult, I think, for people to understand because when I will go and meet friends, let's say, and if that day I'm feeling okay enough energy wise to keep it up for a long time, that still doesn't mean that I have necessarily more energy. It means that I'm just my my body and brain collaborate to use up the energy from the next days, and so it happens often, and it will happen again, for sure. That when I do an intensive activity like a weekend away that I've done twice, or a few hours spent with friends um, or family, I need to rest afterwards. So especially if I talk a lot and get really excited to see people and things like that. And I mean, that's really true. Like, I'm very excited and I'm happy to be there. And it's not a negative thing in any sort of way. But I know that after that, I need to recuperate. Um, and it takes a lot out of me. Like, I will be in more pain in the days following. I will have more digestive problems. I will have more headache. I will I will be more dizzy. I will need to lie down. So it's in a very physical way. It isn't like resting, like, ooh, I've had too much social contact, because the social contact is not the issue in this. It's really a question of sustained attention, talking to people, having to take decisions, and all these things. And again, these things are things that when you have 10,000 units of energy or more, you don't even think about. You don't think about how much talking to somebody takes concentration, focus, presence, etc. You don't realize how much energy just standing around in a crowd takes. So, um, you know, I don't stand around these days. When I come to a crowd, I just sit down. Um, and yeah, and I think on the level of many people who suffer with chronic Lyme disease, there's this fear of not comprehension, because you don't want to complain about your health problems, but you also want people to know that um, it's not fake, that you're sick, that when you are home, you actually are on the couch all the time, and you actually do suffer a lot. And it's a strange thing to explain, but it's because you're so busy keeping up appearances when you're sick that ends up biting you a lot, because you look like you're doing fine. That's a thing. And so it's like a double-edged sword, and you win. There's no way to win. You don't want to appear weak and sick, so you're well, but you also struggle and suffer and are so tired, and you need a break. You can't keep up appearances when you're this sick, or even less sick than I am, like in terms of gravity right now. But when you're struggling and suffering, it's very, very, very difficult and impossible to keep up appearances in the world. So you need to reach out to people. You need to try to find help. Look for doctors that can help you. Look for solutions. Look for naturopaths. And yeah, own it. You gotta own it. It's a very, very difficult thing to do, but if you don't own the fact that you're sick and that it's not your fault, then it just brews shame, and shame is very, very destructive, and shame can turn to some even more negative patterns, like depression. And so, yeah, before I get too intense, this is where I'm gonna end.